This week, Alyssa Miller, BISO at S&P Global, is coming on the show to talk about how the B in BISO is for business. Next up, we welcome Michael Welch, Managing Director at Morgan Franklin, to discuss cyber physical attacks. In the security news, from a stolen laptop to inside the company network, the essential tool for hackers called Discord, fixing your highs, hacking DEF CON, an 11-year-old can show you how to get an RTX 30 series, broadcasting your password, to fuzz or not to fuzz, a real shooting war, evil aerobics instructors, the return of the punk spider, and no root for you. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Can you pinpoint the 10 security gaps in your attack surface that account for 90% of your risk? It's impossible using a combination of scanners, pen tests, breach and attack simulation tools, and manual processes. But attackers can find your gaps. They perform recon and target the weaknesses with the best return. The Cycognito platform sees your external attack surface the way attackers do, eliminating blind spots. Powered by a global bot network, the Cycognito platform prioritizes your highest risk security gaps, integrates with existing workflows, and reduces operational costs. Visit securityweekly.com/Cycognito.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who was recently banned from a furry convention for bad behavior and is now persona non grata. Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 704, being recorded on July 29nd. 29, that's what my teleprompter says. 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. Mr. Larry Pesce is here to my left.
Good evening.
Yes. Happy July 29nd.
That day. Cool.
Mr. Jeff Mann is reporting live from the Archer Studios.
How's it going, everyone? Larry, I haven't seen you in a while.
I know it's been crazy.
And I was even in Rhode Island, and I didn't see.
I know. We had a camping trip. My mother-in-law came into town the day that you were here. Was the day my mother-in-law arrived, and then we went on a week of vacation. So,
man, if there wasn't a reason to skip out on the mother-in-law,
tell me about it. But I couldn't leave my wife home with her alone, or I would have had to dig a hole in the backyard and then bury the body and cover it with endangered plants.
Put yourself in it.
Plants.
No, cover it with an endangered plant, so then it would be illegal to dig up later.
Very good.
Very nice. Yeah. Mr. Tyler Robinson is here with us as well. Tyler, welcome.
I'm going to have to remember that tip. That's actually a pretty good one. I like how you didn't specify whether it was your wife or your mother-in-law that would be in the hole,
right,
based on the events. That was up in the air.
And I never will.
The couple quick announcements. Cyber Risk Alliance, in partnership with InfraGard, has launched the Critical Infrastructure Resilience Benchmark Study. Measure your readiness for ransomware by completing the survey and getting your score. Visit securityweekly.com/CIRB to take the survey. Alyssa Miller.
Oh.
Miller? Did I say
Miller? Before that, I get a quick one. I did a thing. If you go to the SANS website, sans.org/SEC556. The 3-day IoT penetration testing class is live for the upcoming beta at a 50% discount. It's done. It's going to be a thing.
That's awesome. Congrats, man.
It's pretty good too, by the way.
Yeah, Tyler was one of the tech reviewers, one of the peer reviewers.
Nice.
I'm pretty impressed. That was well played.
Excellent. So
good stuff, Larry.
Good stuff.
Very exciting. Alyssa Miller is the BISO of S&P Global and directs the security strategy for the ratings division. Today, she joins us to discuss how the B in BISO is for business. Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks a bunch. Happy to be here. Yeah, really excited. Wow, a whole bunch of good friends hanging out tonight.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to see you. I don't think you haven't been on this show before. I think you were.
I have not been on this one before. No.
Oh, so we have to now ask you how you got your start in information security.
But before that, if I may be so bold,
Are you going to do that all night to me?
Nope. This is it. This is it. And I've been saving this. I've been saving this because when I found out Alyssa was going to be in the show, I was like, because right about the beginning of pandemic, sometime April last year, I stumbled across a picture of Alyssa in her office, and I went, oh my God, that's what I want my pandemic home office to look like, with the whole spread of machines and the amazing lighting. And I'm like, that's it. And I'm jealous, and I'm now nowhere near close. Mm-hmm. So, bravo. All right.
Well, thank you.
Take two.
How'd your office?
Take two.
How'd your office get its start in information?
Right. We'll get there too. How did I get my start in information security? Oh God. So yeah, let's see. I'll try to keep this as short form as possible. I mean, I was a hacker as a kid. First I was the kid who took apart her toys to figure out how they worked. At 12, I bought myself my first computer. This was like late 80s, early 90s when people they weren't like ubiquitous in every home, right? And started learning things like basic programming, modem communications, UART, stuff like that. Found my way into a few online systems that I wasn't paying for, but had access to. You can figure the rest out there. Wasn't really a career for me, though. At that point, I didn't really ever think of even computers as a career. I actually started in pre-med at Marquette University, but after 3 semesters of college, chemistry will teach you really fast that you don't want to be in pre-med. So I got the hell out, needed to change majors. They had this thing called computer science that looked like it was all about programming. I knew how to program. So, okay, cool. Easy degree program, right? Yeah, I was brilliant. Wasn't easy, but it was the .com era. And so right about that time, companies were hiring anybody who knew what a for loop looked like. And I got my first full-time job while I was still in school as a programmer for a local financial services company.
And
I did that for almost...
Java? Was it Java back then?
Oh, God, thank God, no. No. I never actually had to write Java, believe it or not. Somehow through all of that, I was a programmer for a decade in this company, or almost a decade, and never once did I have to write. I had to write some JavaScript, client-side JavaScript, but never once had to write a lick of Java. No, I was mostly C++, C#, VB.NET. Oh God, I can even share this. This is scary. I actually, believe it or not, had to write in VB 1.5.
Wow.
Yes, that brings back some bad traumas.
Yes.
But no, I seriously. So, like I said, like 9 years, I was a programmer when someone from the pen testing team, a manager who I had worked with on a number of projects, came to me and asked if I wanted to join her team as a pen tester. I didn't know anything really about pen testing. She was confident I would figure it out. She expressed that to me, and I said, "What the hell?" And I jumped in, and yeah, I mean, that progressed into me managing that team, leading the vulnerability management program for this, Fortune 200 financial services company. And that was a little crazy. But yeah, then from there, got into consulting, have done a few different things, worked for a product company, for a reseller. And now, most recently, at the beginning of this year, I find myself at, as you mentioned, S&P Global as a BISO for the ratings division.
Alyssa, how do you think it helped you having a background in software development to then become a penetration tester?
I mean, the big thing was, having been a programmer, kind of understanding 2 things. 1, the mindset of a programmer. 2, odd behaviors that occurred in certain frameworks and things. Pen testing a web app written in any form of .NET. Boy, those behaviors stand out really fast, right? I mean, you start to figure out what certain error conditions look like, what they mean, what's likely going on behind the scenes without any access to the code. And it makes it a lot easier to start to experiment and find things. Testing Java apps then were easy too. just because I had seen enough of just, again, you kind of know, you can think like a programmer a little bit. You know what programmers are thinking when they're writing certain things, and you can really, it's really it's kind of bizarre. It's a little subtle, but you start to pick up on just little cues. And so, yeah, I mean, application security has always been kind of my focus because of that background.
Yeah. It's interesting because I find a lot of folks that want to get into the field are like, I want to be a pen tester. And I think if you want to go into that specific area in cybersecurity, that having experience in some other IT or technology job like programmer or admin or network or whatever it is really, really helps, right? And I think, like you said, like you alluded to it, it's hard to kind of realize that and bring people to that realization that haven't gone through it, but I think it's important.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, people of course get nervous because it starts to sound like gatekeeping. I'm not saying you have to do that to be a pen tester. I would never say that. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways, but yeah, it is valuable. It is very helpful to have that background, and to, even if you never wrote code in a corporate environment, at least understanding and having written small applications or something, it gives you a different perspective that is definitely very, very helpful when you're testing an app. Now, by the same token, I can't lie, it does also equip you with certain biases that sometimes can hurt you when you're pen testing, because you think about the code in a way that you would have written it, and then you start to figure out, wait, no, this programmer wrote it very differently. This isn't doing what I thought it was. So sometimes you run into that too. So it's helpful, but it also can have its moments.
You're right, and I never considered this. You bring with you some preconceived notions when you're testing stuff that you used to build, and realize that like you didn't build that network, but when I built networks, I did it this way. Therefore, I think that's a really good avenue to attack it, and it might just be completely invalid, right?
100%. And yeah, that's the thing. And this is why when we talk careers in cybersecurity, I'm always talking about, diversity, right? Because it's, when you don't have diversity, this is what happens. You get 25 pen testers who are all former programmers who all think about things in the same light, and you can miss things that way. Yeah,
the diversity is so important in our field because you need people that think differently, right? I mean, that's oftentimes how, if you look at any of the research, I mean, we cover it every week on the show, it comes down to a lot of just someone thought differently, when they were presented with something. We're going to talk about how someone hacked the DEF CON ticketing system. I mean, they really just thought differently when they got that email from a lot of other people, right?
Insecure direct object reference in 2021? Come on,
then there's
why?
that.
It still kills me. I'm so glad I clearly did not register until after that person found that.
Yeah.
So thank you. I'm glad I was procrastinating. But yeah, that one blew me away just because of the simplicity of it. But I mean, that tells you something too, that this is why we all still have jobs, because there are things so like true. That we need to understand that, hey, devs are in a very different world than what we live in security. We need to be able to kind of connect with that and understand that, they're still going to make mistakes that to us seem like simple and silly, but they happen.
Sometimes I kind of believe like we wouldn't look for something as simplistic of that because you're like, I haven't seen that in forever. That really doesn't happen. But hey, back to diversity, maybe you got a junior person on the team that's like, no, like I read about this, right? I was just reading some articles and like, well, let me try this, right? I think it's important to have those different viewpoints and experiences.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, how many of us in a pen test anymore are sitting there just, or better yet, not even in a pen test, just browsing the web or looking at the URL to see what parameters are on the end. I mean, it just so happens this person did take a look, and maybe on purpose, or maybe they just happened to notice it. But either way, like, once you see it, you're like, holy crap. I read through that write up, and I'm like, in the minute he put in there the URI, it was like, oh, wow, you got to be kidding me. And then you knew right where he was going with it. And sure enough, yeah.
Along those same lines, though, too, right? Like the ability for people to understand business and come from a different background where maybe you have business or you have project management, those can also be beneficial. there's a lot of us that don't program. We don't have to program to be a pen tester. It helps. But those diverse backgrounds can also offer a huge advantage when understanding how an organization works, understanding team dynamics, being able to identify different loopholes and weaknesses within inside a project management system or how they're doing project management. So just because you're not from a developer background, different backgrounds can also lend themselves very well to the offensive space or security in general.
Yeah, well, because you don't have that bias, right? So it's like, I think a lot of times as a pen tester who used to be a programmer, when I approach an app, I'm looking at it from the mindset of a programmer, right? I'm thinking about all the things that might be going on the back end. Someone who doesn't have programming experience is going to come in with that with more of like a user attitude, right? And they're going to think about the way that it works functionally, and that understanding of the functional side very well might lead them to discoveries that I wouldn't find. Sure, I might find some things because I have that programming background that they wouldn't. But again, this is that reason why diversity is so important. And I mean, I can tell you right now, for the apps that my business is writing at S&P, we're a credit rating agency. Like, there's a lot of terminology and stuff that goes on in credit ratings that I've had to learn along the way in these first almost 7 months now that I've been with them, because this is the first time I've worked for a CRA. I never did before. I was in financial services, but a very different space. And so, thinking of that from a pen tester perspective, if I had a pen tester who understood that side of the business really well, they might be able to find things within that app that I would have never thought.
Alyssa, your role today, how did you navigate in your career to end up in like a CISO, BISO kind of role today?
So, I mean, it was kind of a progression. I mean, I mentioned I started as a pen tester and then moved into management within that organization. Then I got into consulting, and, I came into it, I was a managing consultant, which meant that I still did pen testing, but I also was managing a team. And, that went on for a number of years, and then they merged and became this ugly new behemoth that I won't mention. And so I left them and I joined another consulting org where now I was the head of what they call the program services practice, where now it wasn't about like tactical consulting engagements where we were, pen testing an app or doing something like that. This was more, okay, I've got an enterprise of 900 in-house developed apps. How do I build a program to make sure that they're secure? And so, it kind of kept progressing up. And then, I was working for another organization in, again, their consulting arm of this reseller. And I actually had to step back where, I got passed over for a promotion, didn't feel I'd been treated fairly, kind of let that hit my self-confidence a little bit. In fact, to the point that I left and changed my career goals entirely and took an individual contributor role in a job that was going to have me traveling and, traveling internationally, doing a lot of public speaking. And that was going to be like a good focus of my job. And then, COVID hit. So we know how that turned out. And so it was actually through my network then that I came across this particular role where I was friends with the person who at the time was the CISO of S&P. And in fact, I had hosted a webinar, CISO roundtable that she joined, and we connected through that. I talked to her after it, found on her LinkedIn that she had this BISO position open, and I read about it. I'm like, oh, wow, this would really be a great fit. This feels like a good next step for me. And, contacted her. She kind of helped me navigate it, got me connected with the right hiring manager, and lo and behold, yeah, I got hired, and here I sit. So it's kind of a testament to a lot of things. One, just that progression of, going from very technical to more and more higher level roles, overcoming those things that kick you in the butt and hurt your self-confidence a little bit, and, just leveraging my network to get here.
Yeah, I mean, those things are important, though. I know you can easily fall into like regret, but then you look at the Doctor Strange moment where you look at all the various outcomes, and this was your timeline. you wouldn't go change that because you obviously have ended up to be very, very successful.
No, and that's what I've told people. It's like, I think about it. Had I not been passed over for that director position, like I'd probably still be at that company.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be a bad thing, but I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And I really, really love what I'm doing now. Part of what actually helped lift me out of that hole was one of the more massive social media companies out there had an executive search going, and somehow their executive search firm found their way to me and contacted me. And so you talk about something that kind of makes you wake up and say, oh, okay, maybe I do have the skills I thought I did. Maybe them passing me over really was as unfair as I thought it was, and so that kind of helped me pull me out of that hole. Just by the fact that they'd even contacted me for something like that. I hadn't, it was a surprise. And so, those little things, just serendipitous events. I mean, I tell people that all the time. My whole career is just a series of serendipitous events that I happen to wisely enough or just,
Circumstances,
some luck,
right?
took advantage of in the right way.
But I think it's a great message. I mean, I was passed up for a promotion during my career at one point too, right? And I think it's encouraging for the audience to hear that, like, that's not the end of the world, right? Like it's going to mold and shape you, right? It is what you make of it.
Yeah, it makes you more resilient in the end, right? I mean, I can tell you how that event changed when, even when I was interviewing for this particular position, it changed how I approached those interviews. And here was one, I had, a colleague who had brought me into this and was really kind of helping me along and whatnot. But still, I approached that particular, just that entire hiring experience very differently than I had ever done before.
You guys are thinking so small. Let's talk about how many times you've gotten fired in the industry.
Wow.
Me?
That's career building.
Would
Maybe
you believe me if I told you I've only been fired once and it was not from a tech job?
I don't know. I would believe you, but I'm slightly disappointed. But that's just me.
Again, dumb luck. The number of mergers I've been through and never got riffed. Never. I mean, I survived. Post 9/11 apocalypse, the post 2008 economic apocalypse. I've been through all of those and somehow never. I don't know how. Again, dumb serendipitous luck. I'll take it. And I've been able to leverage that. I'm certainly well aware of the kind of privilege and good fortune that I've had because of that.
Maybe you have people skills.
That's the one time I got fired. I think I was 18 or 19, something like that. No, probably not even that old. God, I don't even remember how old, but I swore in front of a customer. I was working for a cell phone company. And I was mad at a fellow employee who didn't come into work, or no, he bailed early, and I had to take one of his jobs and do it. And I cussed him out on the phone, and with customers standing across the counter 8 feet away. And surprisingly, U.S. Cellular didn't take too kindly to that, and out the door I went. I've learned a little since.
Yeah.
How to behave
I give
in
you a
corporate
pass.
environments.
If you curse and you work for a cell phone company, especially in the retail store, I can't blame you.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely 100% deserve to get fired. As much as I told them that they had no right to fire me. Oh God, I should have been fired on the spot. I'm surprised they let me leave that day and come back the next day to find out I'd been fired. So
Alyssa, what's a BISO?
What is a BISO? A Business Information Security Officer, which I know that doesn't mean much more, does it? Honestly,
clarifying. Let's move on to the next question.
How does a BISO differ from a CISO?
It's funny. It's not. So that's the thing, right? Different organizations approach it a little bit differently. The vast majority that I've seen, though, approach it the way that my organization does and a lot of the financial services companies do, which is it's kind of like a divisional CISO. But the big difference is usually divisional CISOs ultimately have some reporting structure into like the central CISO organization or something like that. In this case, no, none of it. My role is 100% within the business. I report to a divisional CTO And my charter is a little different. My charter is not, hey, do the cybersecurity thing. It's, hey, how do we marry cybersecurity and our business strategy together? And so it's kind of the way I always tell people, it's like serving as a two-way bridge. Because on one hand, I'm trying to take all of this stuff that the security team, that centralized CISO organization is telling me we've got to do, and I'm trying to get my business folks to adopt it in a way that makes business sense and drives business value and enables us that way as best we can, or at least grease the wheels to minimize the friction. But on the other hand, it's also a lot of trying to influence that centralized CISO organization, the risk management organization, folks like that, to understand what's going on within the business and to shape what it is that they're bringing to us, so that they understand, how we need to be serviced best within the business. Because, I mean, I hate to say this because it's such a cliche, but let's be honest. If the business isn't making money, we all go home. None of us have jobs. So, there's always been, as long as I've been in the corporate world, there's always been that, that sort of conflicting forces of the business versus security. And my role is ultimately to kind of resolve those and get them working together.
Do you see that shifting currently, like with the having less friction with inside of the business organizations, having executive and board members understand the importance of security, having some of that cohesion and vocabulary collaboration? Is that starting to get better as you see it?
I'm seeing some improvements. Yeah. I mean, across the board, yes. I mean, I think overall, from where we were, even 15 years ago to now, has changed quite a bit, right? I mean, it's a very different attitude overall. I mean, you mentioned, just the awareness at executive and board levels, the priority that gets placed on cybersecurity. I mean, the number of board meetings and executive updates and other things that I have to be a part of just to share our cybersecurity updates is so different than it was before, right? I mean, it used to be the CISO had a fight just to get heard, even to be included in an executive meeting, let alone a board meeting. Now you've got boards actually inviting the CISOs to come in, and in my case, the BISOs to come into those conversations.
My fear with this sort of role, and not with you, Alyssa, but with this role is that, like, everyone will hate you because you're telling the business that, like, you should do the stuff for security, and they might say no. And then if the answer is no, you're going to take the answer back to the central security division, go, yeah, like, they don't want to do that. And, like, you could end up with, like, both sides not liking you.
You could.
Right? But with this role, right, that's my concern.
Oh, absolutely you could. And this is why this is not the job for just anybody, right? And I mean, that's not me tooting my own horn. There's a lot of great BISOs out there, but you have to be able to think like a security person who has empathy for development, first and foremost, because you have to understand the dev side. You have to understand the product side and be willing to explain things to them in a way where they see the advantage to them. So when I'm talking about, well, we have to get these, we have to get our SaaS tool running every time we do a build. Okay, that sounds really onerous and horrible. But now it's like, well, here, look, we've got this way that we can enable this. And now this thing that you've been doing manually, we can automate that in our case, an ADO. And okay, we make that part of our build scripts. And oh, you're thinking we have to break the build? No, let's talk about how we handle that a little bit differently. Rather than break the build, if that security test has bad results, let's look at how we can handle that differently and keep product development moving forward. So it's actually a way of telling the story in the DevSecOps construct, which ultimately wins you allies on that side, right? Because now you're showing them how to do these things that security's been telling them they have to do for years, but you're showing them how to do it in a way that makes more sense to them and makes their life easier.
Them. Yeah. I mean,
on the flip side, security, sometimes they get upset with me because I push back pretty hard on them sometimes. In fact, I just had that conversation with somebody in their team yesterday. But at the same time, I'm also giving them a voice when they do have something that really needs to be prioritized, some initiative that they're just not getting traction. I can help win that traction. And so it's recognizing how do you build the credibility on both sides,
Right.
and that's how you avoid them hating you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's pitching. I mean, it sounds easy, right? But you can just pitch security as helping the dev teams. And that's easy to say, but much harder to accomplish, I think, too.
Totally. And that's why I say it's not for everybody. Like, honestly, if you don't have some context for what it's like to be on that product side, it would probably be harder to do this job. I don't know. I mean, I'll never say someone can't do a job because they don't have a certain background, but it is going to make it a lot more difficult because you have to have that understanding, that old school authoritarian style of information security. That doesn't work. And it will not work in this case. If you come into it and you think your role is that you're going to dictate to devs how to do things securely, and you're going to, make security a shared responsibility for all, what are they getting out of it? You have to show them what they're getting out of it. And sometimes, that can be really challenging depending on what it is. But that again too is where, okay, now you can sort of, you can sort of shape what security does too and get them to think that way as well. So, Okay, you want me to roll out and have all my users enroll in some new MFA thing. Okay, well, how can we connect that to something else that they'll like, that will make their job easier if they get enrolled into MFA? Like, can I connect that with, some tooling or something that only works if they have the MFA? So, hey, you enroll in MFA and now you have this cool tool or whatever that makes your life easier. You can follow this simpler process that makes your life easier. Now they'll buy into it. Right. Now it's easier to get credibility and show them why this is the way to go forward.
Yeah, it's about building trust with security too. And, go back to developers for a moment. Like, how do you get them to trust the security tools and processes? Because I feel like it falls flat on its face if you implement a tool that's like, yeah, here's 100 results and 50% of those are false positives.
Oh, for sure. Right. And so there again, okay, so how do we look at this? How do we make this different? Can we automate the submission of those false positive reviews? And how do those get processed? How can we handle those faster? If you really get good at this and you start thinking about it, it's like, remember we always talked about push left?
Yeah.
Like, how long have we been saying push left?
We were talking about that earlier with someone I was interviewing about shifting left, but I think people look at it as kind of a silver bullet, right? Oh, just, secure your code, just shift left. What?
Yeah, but what does it mean? And that's the thing. So think about this. If you've got this problem, say your SaaS tool's right, it's kicking out a bunch of, false positives. Well, instead of, the traditional mode for that, right, is you report a false positive, someone in the security team will review it. Yeah, they'll say, okay, that's a false positive. They'll put in some exception or whatever, something to filter those out. Why can't we have a world where we have this concept of security champions that we, again, something gets talked about a lot, but we don't see a lot of it actually executed. But where you've got people who are part of that dev team, but have that security acumen, and you can actually trust them and make them accountable so that they can go in and say, this is a false positive, and you don't have to go back and loop it through the security team with that long feedback loop.
Right.
Instead, someone right there in the moment can mark it false positive. And that's the thing, right?
Is that training someone, or is that building someone up from the inside? Is that hiring someone that has that security and developer aspect to a specific role within inside of that?
So security champions form a lot of ways, but yeah, it's usually there's some form of training. The ideal here is you get a community of these folks, right? So it's not just that, yeah, of course you're going to give them training. You're going to want them to understand OWASP top 10 and whatever, be able to maybe even like leverage tools like Burp Suite or something. But the bigger part of it is creating that community where they become part of the culture, and you've got security champions from across the organization comparing notes, sharing ideas, coming up with new initiatives of their own. So you've now created this body within your engineering teams who are empowered to make certain security decisions or, set certain security direction. And talk about gaining buy-in and actually like truly creating like a culture where security is something that, isn't just a thing that we have to do in order to deploy, but it's actually part of our daily lives. That's an awesome way to make that happen. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's a way, again, where now instead of those security things that you put, instead of creating these gates that are going to be those things that stop them, you've now integrated security into all the phases of the pipeline. So none of them actually stop the pipeline from moving forward. They make sure that there's no reason to, because you're doing all the security things inside that phase.
How do we get developers to write better, more secure code? Or if we let that ship sail and we know that what gets pushed out, it's going to have bugs and we have to deal with them and fix them more quickly.
I mean, how do we get them not to create functional bugs? I don't think we've solved that problem either, right?
Right.
But that's where CI/CD comes into play, for instance, right? I mean, the whole idea with CI/CD is, okay, boom, we go through, we release this thing, and now we're doing it so fast. We've got deploys going out, every, in some cases, every few minutes. How do we take that and use that now to make sure that, okay, we get better with security because, hey, we deployed something with bugs, but we come back around and we fix it right away. We've got this fast pipeline that we can go from a P1 user story to a deployment in a matter of hours to a day. I like that answer a lot better than, okay, I have fewer bugs, but it takes me 2 months to fix them.
It's a lot of work to get to that point, though. Especially if you haven't built that app specifically to have those pipeline elements. If you've got a waterfall app, basically developers have to take a time out and go. They have to build, which is interesting, build software to automate the process or link things together, which takes time and testing. Right? How do you justify that? I've done some creative things to try and justify that because it means more resources. Either your existing resources have to take a time out, or you have to go get other resources. Both are potentially equally as expensive.
Yeah, I mean, there's expense to it, but there's also there's definitely business competitive advantage that comes with it too, right? I mean, the ability to be able to respond and deploy either a bug fix or a new user feature or whatnot in such a fast timeline carries with it some serious business benefit. And so a lot of times that's where that's how teams are justifying the move to DevOps and CI/CD in the first place. It's like, look, we go into this mode where we're focused on reducing works in progress and deploying as fast as we can so that each time through each iteration of that pipeline is so efficient that all we have to do, then we manage our bugs and we manage our features by priority. And that's how we make sure things that have to get fixed fast. And, rather than, putting things through a whole design cycle, everything else, the pieces that seemed like were great and worked great in waterfall, but, we've moved away from now as we've become more agile and we've kind of gotten to this idea of the user story. So we just continue to evolve that. And the fear, of course, always is, well, how do you fit security into that? And that's where we just recognize it's still that same push left story, but how do we adapt? One of the things I talk a lot about is this idea of user story threat modeling, where instead of, creating DFDs and going through this whole big process, just have the business person who's writing that user story take a few minutes to add in some context about what the core assets are, or what critical assets are involved in that user story, and just plain language threats. What are the threats? Is it a threat that someone's going to steal something here? Is there a threat that somebody's going to attack the availability of this particular piece of functionality? What's the biggest threat? Put that information in the user story. Now you don't need a big design cycle. Now that feeds into the devs. When they grab that user story and they start their sprint, or however you manage that, they take it off the backlog. It's sitting there looking at them. Now they can start to think in terms of, okay, what do I have to do from countermeasures perspective? And again, as you gain maturity, now maybe you have things like reference architectures that they can go to. Oh, I need to implement some type of authorization. Hey, look, here's our reference architecture for how we implement OAuth 2. I'll pull that in. Now I don't have to roll my own. It's already there. It's fairly close to Lego style plug and play. That now feeds my QA team because they understand the threats. They understand what controls were implemented. They know what they have to prioritize in terms of testing. And now when you deploy, you still have all that information. I know what I prioritized in my tests. I know what controls are there. I know what the threats are. So I know what I need to monitor for post-deployment.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the maturity we're looking for.
Have you watched Loki?
I watched Loki. No.
Loki, there's this concept of variance. I won't spoil it for anyone, but I made that analogy of variance in when we I hate using architect as a verb, but when we architect an application, you oftentimes have dev teams that, oh, we have to build a new application or build a new service inside of this application, and I want to do it in a new or different way. OAuth 2 is a great example, right? Oh, when I do authentication and authorization, I want to do it this way and use this new service or this new library. And then the next team comes along to build the next service or application, and they've got to get a different way because Amazon's released another service that's really cool, and I want to use it. And what ends up happening is you get a lot of variance, and I think that really sucks for security. And what I hear you saying, Alyssa, is you want to build those reusable modules and reduce the number of variant, which can be really hard because Amazon comes out with a new service every day, it seemingly.
Yeah, it does take a commitment to innovation too, right? I mean, your reference architectures should never be static. They should have that ability to adapt and grow, or you're creating a new reference architecture. The fact of the matter is, that type of approach where, hey, I want to use the newest, latest, and greatest thing, that's onerous for developers though too. And so there is kind of the culture of, okay, how do we look at this from, we want to be able to innovate, we want to do the right things, but we also want to do the right things for the right reasons. And, a lot of times, and I've run into it in other roles where you get that dev who you can tell just wants to use something because it's the cool new shiny thing. And it's like, well, if we go down that route, you're going to have to, this has to go through some type of review and whatever. Whereas if you leverage this that we already have, it meets all the requirements that you've just told me you have. And it'll be so much easier because we've already architected it. That's not always an easy discussion. I'm not going to pretend like it is. Sometimes that can be very difficult. But that's where, again, kind of having a culture where people feel a certain enablement to do that, but they're still accountable as well, right? I mean, they're still accountable for things got to get out, things got to, you got to deliver fast, you got to deliver secure, you got to deliver stable.
When you got to meet the requirements, right? And so Angular might meet your requirement, but someone's got to stand up at the meeting and go, that's a Google product, they're probably going to kill it. Which happened. I just looked up the other day. Yeah. Right? Now it's end of life.
And if you want to get sneaky about it too, go to a multi-cloud. Now you can't get locked in. Now you can't say, well, I'm going to do this because it's a cool new thing that Amazon released. Well, does Azure have it? No. Well, then that doesn't fit our multi-cloud strategy. I mean, there are things like that too, right? That do come up, and having that awareness of how do we do this differently. You mentioned this idea, you kind of went down the path of, even functions. So moving into a serverless world, how do we, leverage standard functions? And then when we determine a function doesn't meet our needs, it becomes a question, do we create a different function for that? Or do we modify the one that we have? All of these things, they're all the innovative, cool new toys that people want to play with, but they do actually, when you adopt them, they can serve a security purpose too.
Yeah, how do you balance across multi-cloud? That's always been a really interesting security nugget, right? I mean, you mentioned functions, right? Each major cloud provider has its own version of functions. How do you choose? Do you end up with more than one? And then how do you secure that? Do you just rely on your tooling? That's always been a tricky one for me.
Nobody that I know of has really come out with the end all be all answer to multi-cloud. That's for sure. I mean, and to be fair, that's one of the journeys I'm on right now in my current organization, is how do we really architect a multi-cloud solution? Because you're right. I mean, a lot of things happen there, right? How are we going to leverage just identity management across a multi-cloud environment? Okay, if we use Azure AD, can we plug that into AWS? Sure, but we need to understand how. What about if we leverage GCP or Oracle? What does that look like then? Do we need to use a different identity provider? To your point, do we have to have different providers based on which cloud environment we're in? And then we have to, as we construct things from an infrastructure perspective and even from the software side with whatever functions we're creating or whatever, do we have to have, how can we, abstract those enough where they do apply across cloud? Can we even do that across clouds?
Do you find that it's like useful and actually functional that security vendors today are coming out with multi-cloud solutions? Can we sort of rely on that? I know Aqua just had an announcement, actually specific, I believe, to functions, where they're supporting it across multiple clouds. Do you think we still got a lot of work to do there, or have we made some progress?
There's a lot of work to do there. That's why you're seeing all the vendors kind of talk about it, right? Because they know it's a problem that no one's solved, and so they're all going to come and say that they've solved it. You just have to buy their tool, and then you'll be unhackable. The reality is it doesn't work that way. Yeah, but that's how you can
how
kind of
deep
tell.
does it go, right? Like support is one thing. Like, oh yeah, we support this thing in this cloud. But like, support it how? Like, are you just like grabbing the logs, or is it like runtime? Is it like, what is it?
Well, and there's a difference between support and integration.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that whole horrible cliche single pane of glass crap. Can we get away from that? But the legitimacy behind that is, if you're asking me how, what I want in a tool that's going to manage security in a multi-cloud environment, that has to all be seamless to me, right? Like whether it's an Azure tenant, whether it's AWS, whether it's something that exists in Oracle or Alibaba, or I don't care who, your tool needs to show me what I need to see from a security visibility perspective. It needs to show it to me the same way, right? And it needs to make that translation. It needs to provide that integration, and it needs to provide that across those providers. So when you say you support it, if it's not integrated, if you have this, you have to go here. If you have this, you have to go here in our tool. Great, you support it, but you haven't integrated it. Yeah. And you've just made my life worse because you just added another layer, but it's still all separate.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, so far is what I've seen with most of the solutions that claim to be multi-cloud. They're not really bringing it together where I can just say, I don't care what the infrastructure is that sits underneath this.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, do you go containers? This is always the tricky one for me too. Like, I never thought I'd think of containers as like the heavyweight in the application space, right? But it's interesting how that really became true. Whereas like, but now I have to maintain the container, and that's kind of a pain in the butt. And then I got to drop some kind of agent on all my containers. Then, okay, granted, it doesn't matter where they run. I still have visibility, maybe some control, but now I'm maintaining a container. Whereas those cloud providers have these services that are even lighter weight that I don't really even have to write code sometimes, right? It's just configuration. And now I've replaced this container that I have to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. It is really relative, because I remember the days when VMware was the answer to all that, right?
Just put it in a VM.
And then we figured out, oh, crap, it's really hard to deploy a VM. Well, we have VMware images. Great, cool. All right, well, and that kind of sucked. So then we got EC2 and Amazon, and oh, great, but now someone's got to manage those AMIs. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So we did containers. Oh, good, we have containers, but someone's got to manage that base image, and someone's got to customize that base image to be our, golden image.
And then we have Kubernetes.
On and on and on. And it shrinks in scope, but it doesn't feel any better, right? Yeah. It's still something we have to manage. We have to constantly be updating. And I mean, you go look at some of the official images in Docker Hub right now and the vulnerabilities they have.
They're atrocious.
Yeah, you're not using them out of the box.
I mean, they're atrocious. It depends on who you're asking, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has gotten a little better. I think some of the security messaging has been heard with respects to Docker Hub, and I've noticed some projects like not running as root. Like that's good. Like baby steps. Okay.
Well, and Docker's made a lot of effort in that regard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they did some of their own security tooling. They integrated a couple tools as well that now you can actually, scan your Docker, that base image before you pull it and, leverage it for your environment. So, I mean, it's getting better. Yeah, you still have to be aware that just because it's an official image doesn't mean it's vulnerability free.
Yeah, and it's interesting too when we talk about testing in CI/CD pipelines. One of the things I like about containers, I can spin them up easily locally. If my app starts using a bunch of cloud native services, basically I get a bigger bill if I want to spin up more infrastructure, right, to scan and test, and that's a balance.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, you want all this cool convenience and whatever. Of course, it's going to cost you, and even that. Honestly, some of the coolest multi-cloud tools I'm seeing right now are the ones that help you figure out how to optimize your spend by putting different types of infrastructure in different clouds.
Oh, that's really cool.
I mean, that to me is kind of cool, right? I mean, it won't take long for Microsoft and Amazon and Google to figure that out and to probably, to start level setting a little bit there, we'll call it. But, for now, at least it's kind of a really neat thought process that you talk about some innovative way of looking at it. Wow, we could actually leverage multi-cloud to get cheaper. Okay, cool.
More questions for Alyssa? I know we've been kind of nerding out in the AppSec stuff.
That's good though.
What kind of personal projects are you currently working on?
Boy, you know what? I don't know. I've actually kind of slowed down for a while. I mean, I had been really heavy last year into like the deep fake stuff. You guys probably saw some of that on the socials and whatever. And deep fakes kind of took a weird turn. And that kind of, it's still interesting research, but they've really gone like down a consumeristic path that, doesn't really, I don't know. Every threat that we thought deepfakes were going to pose hasn't happened because there's so much easier ways to still hack people. I mean, I can social engineer you in far easier ways than trying to create a deepfake video or trying to create a deepfake audio. I mean, so yeah, from a project side, I've been so focused, I think, on what we're doing within our business, which has forced me to get really deeper into some of the cloud native technologies than I was even before. So I mean, most of my projects I guess right now are really more related to that. I'm hopefully wrapping up my book here soon. I've got 2 chapters left to turn in, and they're getting close to done. And then it's done. So that'll be, that's been a big project that I've been working on. But yeah, from a security research side, I actually have kind of taken a step back for a while, and it's been more about, just kind of getting up to speed in this new role.
And writing a book,
quick teaser. What's the book about?
So the book I'm writing is the Cyber Defender's Career Guide, which is a guide for getting into a cybersecurity career, not focused on just pen testing, as we were talking about earlier, but really talking about the wide range of roles and how do you, some concrete strategies for how to get here, using some of the research that I did last year around that to really kind of show where the challenges are, where you can get value and where maybe you don't find the value you would expect. Like, do you really get value in your job search from having a mentor or from having a degree or from having a certification? Maybe not as much as you thought. And so, really trying to arm people with better ideas for how they can get that first foot in the door, and giving them some really cool tools, exercises, and strategies to help them along the way.
We'll have to have you back to talk about the book for sure.
Yeah, I got to get it done. I mean, right now you can go out and you can buy it today. You can pre-purchase it and you can actually preview it. It's kind of cool. They let you read an electronic version of it before it's even done. So you can read unedited chapters 1 through 7.
Wow.
I think we're there now. So, and they, as I finish things up, they keep releasing more of the book. And then, ultimately when it all is edited and truly published, you'll get that final version, either in like ebook or printed version.
Nice. That's cool.
Nice.
Alyssa, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Let's do it.
3 words to describe yourself.
Authentic, insane, and I mean that in a good way, and empathetic.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
A sword, a short sword.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
She had no clue.
Favorite hacker movie?
Sneakers. Excuse me. God, I almost said hackers. I want to slap myself now. Sneakers. Sneakers. All the way.
Alyssa's
Sneakers.
my best friend.
There
Paul.
you go. There you go.
Just talked about this on the Twitters the other day. Yes.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Holy crap.
So it's just a small field to play from, right?
Yeah, wow. 2 celebrities to be my parents. Boy, I'll take Pat Benatar.
Oh.
And boy, Idris Elba.
Alyssa,
Interesting.
thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. I had a blast.
Good seeing you again. And, of course, coming up next, Michael Welch. Stick around.